Another result of my research were findings which could indicate a male envy of menstruation. There are theories that the Amerindian sweat lodge is a male attempt to emulate women's periods. Subincision, the splitting open of the urethra, is practiced by the Wogeo men of Papua New Guinea, in emulation of the purification which women undergo during menstruation. Subincision and supercision, where the prepuce is cut but no skin is removed, are practiced in Australia, South America, Fiji and Africa. One theory is that it's done to simulate the female genitals, this argument being further enhanced by the fact that men often gash the subincised or supersized penis to draw blood during rituals. Montague says, "Seeing in the female that blood originated from the vulva, what is more natural than to make it come from the analogous organ in the male?" Now it is interesting to notice that there's actually very little reference to menstrual blood being used in tribal spiritual practices. And in religious ceremonies such as those used in Santeria, which is an African diaspora religion, women who are menstruating do not participate in ceremonies or work with the religious mysteries. It is said that they should use that time to meditate, honour divinity, and allow their bodies to rest. Research has shown that lack of dream sleep produces similar effects to PMS, and that women allowed more time to sleep and to meditate lost many of the negative symptoms. So if menstruation is truly a time when the human consciousness is doing something differently, this may well be a practical explanation for some belief systems, such as Santeria, recommendation of rest and meditation during the menses, rather than hands-on spiritual work. However, it is worth bearing in mind that in Santeria a priest may not work with an open wound of any sort, in case the spirits mistake the blood for an offering and develop a taste for it. As conception does not normally occur during menstruation, certain sects like the Baals of modern Bengal practice sexual union without issue, by intercourse during menstruation. However, a child born as a result of such a union is considered to be imbued with a very strong power, usually for evil. The English of the 13th century believed a child conceived during menstruation was likely to be born with red hair and to contract leprosy. Tantric and alchemical practices, however, do consider the menstruating woman to be essential to their practice, bearing in mind that any culture or belief system that accepts sex during menstruation is accepting sex for a purpose other than procreation. The medieval alchemists of Europe considered that an essential ingredient for the philosopher's stone was to be found in the menses of a whore, and a similar idea prevailed in tantric alchemy. As with many other traditions, Hindus regard menstruation as a time of woman's impurity. However, in Tantrism, the situation is reversed, and any menstruating woman is considered to be the goddess incarnate. The Chinese also laid great belief in the restorative qualities of pills, in which the menstrual discharges of young and beautiful girls were the main ingredient. However, access to these pills were restricted to only the royals and the very, very powerful and wealthy.
What springs to mind from what Charlotte's just said is how, as someone who wants to reconstruct the ancient Egyptian magical religion in a more authentic form rather than in the form you might find it in the Hollywood movies, that the context, the material she talks about from voodoo and other live-in traditions today are actually, I think, give you a more accurate picture of what ancient Egyptian magic was actually like. And some of the artifacts that we're talking about, like the ankh and the bandaging, are almost like things that are left out of the account of Egyptian magic that actually give you a better picture of what it was really like. Okay, now I wanted to talk a little bit about the world's oldest myth, and that myth is the myth of the destruction of humanity. You can find examples of this in the Book of the Heavenly Cow, which is edited by Hornum, and this account, which you might find in other mythologies as well, tells us about a time back in distant history of humanity when there was a rebellion against the aged sun god. I'm not sure what the reason for the rebellion is, but perhaps it's something about human nature, that human nature does rebel. And gods, especially aged sun gods, tend to get quite angry about this. And as a punishment, the god Ra sends out one of his eyes, the fiery eye, which is personified as the goddess Hathor. And he sends her out with a task to cull what he calls the divine cattle. And the divine cattle is just another name for the human beings. So the god Ra sends out his emissary Hathor to kill off humanity, or at least to cull them, to teach them a lesson by killing a certain percentage of them. There's another version of this myth that comes from the Middle Kingdom times, in which instead of Hathor it's another called the lion goddess Sekhmet. The interesting thing for me is that Hathor becomes mad with bloodlust. She enjoys the killing too much. She becomes so mad with the blood that rather than just culling the divine cattle, she's not going to stop killing and eating and drinking their blood until they're all gone. And Ra, even though he was very angry with humanity for their rebellion, doesn't actually want to destroy the entire creation. So he's a bit worried by this whole process that he's set in motion. He has to come up with some way to stop the killing. And the way he does this is knowing that Hathor is very much fond, like all the gods in fact, are very fond of blood, works out another form of blood that he can give her, a fake blood, which is to take some beer and dye it with another very ancient and important ritual substance, red ochre. And if you've ever had to drink beer dyed with red ochre, you'll know it tastes very like blood because of the iron of the ochre. And you should know that all gods, certainly all gods in ancient Egypt, and I'd say all gods, period, all gods drink blood. But in the Egyptian example, it's almost like henceforth, from the time of the myth, which is a very, very old myth, they have a substitute. They don't actually use blood. They use something else. They use beer, is the main ritual substance, in fact, in ancient Egypt, dyed with something to make it taste like blood. It's also recording a moment in which people turned away from the use of blood in rituals or found something else. And interesting, the thing that they find is that Hathor, not only does he like blood and killings, he's also very fond of music, dance and getting drunk. Which reminds me of the line from the Book of the Law, all acts of love and pleasure are her rituals. And that line from the poem applies especially well to Hathor, I think. She really does love music, dance and drunkenness and anything to do with pleasure. And in that sense, Hathor is very like another demonized god called Seth. Like Seth, she is also an ancient stellar deity. Hathor is to do with the stars and astrology and what controls a person's fate that comes from outside of them. And in that sense, Hathor, who does all this killing in her history, also holds the secret of a person's fate. Whenever a person is born, their name is inscribed in a special book that she keeps everybody's name and eventual fate in. And when your time comes round, she has 7 demonic adversaries known as the Hatayu, which she dispatches to go and do the killing for her. Perhaps if you say it's too dangerous for her to go herself and kill people because she tends to get carried away, but she has demonic adversaries that she sends out to do the killing. In a nice euphemism, they're also known as flower cutters, and they carry special flint knives for the purpose of cutting the flowers, which is perhaps the reason why the offering of cut flowers is so common at a funeral. It's a very, very ancient practice, and perhaps comes from this Neolithic idea that the people who cut you down are cutting you down like a flower. The other thing that strikes me about this myth of Hathor, her liking for blood, her propensity to go out and kill people, and the fact that she can be put off with a little bit of music and dance and a party, is that this is maybe the origin in the ancient world of the myth of the Tsar. In the Tsar cult, people, when they're possessed by these ancient ancestral spirits, also use a bit of dance, alcohol, food to distract them. The task of the magician is to, first of all, find this special book, to understand why your name is in there, and to remove your name from her book. Therefore, to cheat fate. And this is the other part of the topic, is this whole issue of the demonic initiation. And not just knowing what the demons know about you, but making them forget. And that process is very, very close to the idea that we have in the modern world of exorcism. Rather than just blasting the supposed possessing entity, the demon, away. One should get to know them, offer them something, and have some sort of conversation with them. And that again is the process of demonic initiation.